We're now a year and a half into the pandemic, which is enough time to start looking back and drawing real lessons, especially when comparing it to the last great jolt to the international system, the global financial crisis. Did we learn any lessons from 2008? Have we handled this one any better? At first glance, the comparison would seem to favor the present. About 18 months into the 2008 crisis, say by the middle of 2009, US unemployment was still climbing to its highest numbers in decades. The stock market was struggling out of one of the worst collapses in history. Housing foreclosures were spiraling to their worst levels ever. By contrast, today, with half the population vaccinated, the American economy is roaring. Growth rates rival the Reagan boom. The stock market is at new highs. Even wages show signs of rising. While the US is doing better than most, other major industrial countries are also on the road to recovery. And the chief reason is everyone learned the lesson of 2008. In systemic collapses, governments need to go big and fast, spending money and providing liquidity. The voices of austerity in the United States and Europe, which were extremely powerful during the 2008 crisis, have been largely silent this time around. That's where the good news ends. Back in 2008, policymakers quickly recognized the need for fundamental change. The financial system was risky, poorly regulated, and unstable. In 2010, just 2 years later, the United States enacted sweeping reforms to banks, higher capital requirements, lower leverage, less speculation, stress tests, all of which the banks lobbied hard against. But the banks were wrong. In this pandemic, the financial system has performed remarkably well, a testament to those reforms. Despite the near shutdown of the entire global economy in 2020, banks almost everywhere weathered the storm. That's because central banks supported them, but also because they were well capitalized and more tightly regulated. Yet in the current crisis, despite our many failures in fighting the disease, we're talking very little about structural reforms. During the pandemic, we watched as governments in many countries failed on basic public health functions, such as testing, tracing, quarantining, and clear public communication. Some learned and recovered, but many have simply been saved by the early arrival of vaccines. Almost none have begun to ask how to genuinely reorganize their public health bureaucracies, to learn from countries that got it right, and to put in place new policies, procedures, frameworks to ensure better performance during the next pandemic, which will surely come.